The day my husband was buried, my mother-in-law was 40 minutes away, sitting at a kitchen table, dividing up his life insurance money on a legal pad. I know this because my sister-in-law told me, not out of guilt. She told me because she wanted me to know they had already decided, and that I should make peace with it. My husband's name was Dominic. He was 34 years old. He coached Little League on Saturday mornings and made terrible pancakes and laughed at his own jokes before he got to the punchline. He died on a Tuesday in March from a brain aneurysm that nobody saw coming. He was alive on Monday. He was gone on Tuesday. That's all there was to it. The life insurance policy was $900,000. Dominic had taken it out 3 years before he died, right after our daughter was born. He was meticulous about things like that. He kept a folder in our filing cabinet labeled "In Case," and inside it were the policy, the deed to our house, copies of our wills, and a handwritten note that said, "If something happens to me, you call Hargrove and Associates first. Don't sign anything until you do." He had the name and number paperclipped to the top. I called them from the hospital parking lot, sitting in my car in the dark, before I had even called my own mother. My in-laws were not at the burial. My mother-in-law said she couldn't handle it emotionally. My father-in-law said he had a doctor's appointment he couldn't reschedule. My sister-in-law, Dominic's younger sister, 26 years old, who he had basically co-raised after their parents went through a bad stretch in her teenage years, said she was too upset to drive. They sent a flower arrangement. White lilies in a green foam vase, the kind you order online in about 4 minutes. I stood at that graveside with my 3-year-old daughter on my hip and my own mother beside me, and 2 of Dominic's co-workers who barely knew him, and I said goodbye to my husband in the cold. And the whole time I kept thinking, he deserved better than this. Not just better than dying at 34. Better than a family who couldn't manage 40 minutes on the worst day of my life. I went home. I fed my daughter. I sat on the kitchen floor after she fell asleep, and I didn't cry. I thought I would. I waited for it. It didn't come. What came instead was something quieter and much colder, like a door closing inside my chest. The calls started 8 days later. My mother-in-law called first. She asked how I was doing, and I said I was managing, and she said she was glad to hear that. And then, after about 45 seconds of that, she said, "We've been talking as a family, and we think it would be appropriate to discuss Dominic's estate." I said, "What about it?" She said Dominic would have wanted his family taken care of. She said that the money, she didn't call it life insurance, she called it the money, like it was something that had just materialized, should go toward helping his sister get on her feet. His sister had recently lost her job and was behind on rent and had been talking about wanting to move to Austin to start over. My mother-in-law described this plan with the confidence of someone reading from a document they had already drafted. I was quiet for long enough that she asked if I was still there. I said, "I'll need to think about it," she said. "Of course. Take a few days." I didn't take a few days. I called the attorney at Hargrove and Associates the next morning, and I told him everything. He was not surprised. He said, "People often reveal themselves very quickly in these situations." He told me exactly what I needed to do and in what order, and I started that afternoon. What happened over the next 3 weeks was something I am still not entirely able to explain without my hands getting cold. It wasn't that I hadn't known who my in-laws were. I had known, in the way you know things you don't let yourself look at directly. I had watched Dominic manage them his entire adult life, deflecting his mother's manipulations, mediating between his sister and everyone else, sending money quietly when his sister needed it, never making a big deal of it, because making a big deal of it would have made it worse. He was generous with people who did not deserve his generosity, and he did it without resentment, and I had always admired that about him. Now he was gone, and there was nobody left to manage anything. And what I was left with was the unmanaged version. My mother-in-law called again 4 days after the first call. She said she had spoken to a family friend who was familiar with estate law, and that she believed I had a legal obligation to consider the family's financial needs given Dominic's wishes. I asked her what Dominic's wishes were. She said he had always talked about wanting to take care of his sister. I said, "Did he put that in writing anywhere?" There was a pause. She said it was understood. I said I would take that under consideration. My sister-in-law texted me 2 days after that. The text was long and it went through several phases. It started with grief. It moved into reminiscing. It arrived, after about 6 paragraphs, at the point, which was that she had found an apartment complex in Austin that was doing move-in specials and she needed first and last month's rent and a security deposit, which came to about $4,800. And she was wondering if I could help with that as a starting point while the larger conversation continued. I read the text twice. I set my phone down on the counter. I picked it up again. I typed back, "I'm still working through everything with the attorneys. I'll be in touch." She replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. The larger conversation, it turned out, did not stay a conversation for very long. My father-in-law called me on a Wednesday evening. He was the one I had always understood least, a quiet man who seemed to experience the world from behind a pane of glass. Never quite present, never quite absent. He said he was calling because he was worried about me. He said, grief could make people act in ways that weren't in their best interest. He said he hoped I was talking to someone, and then, very carefully, he said that if it ever seemed like I wasn't coping well, the family would feel an obligation to look into whether my daughter's situation was being properly managed. I made him repeat that. He repeated it. More carefully this time. He said he didn't mean anything by it. He said he just wanted me to know that they were watching out for everyone. I hung up. My hands were completely steady. That's the thing I remember most. How steady my hands were. I had been recording the calls, not because I had known it would come to this. I had started recording them because my attorney told me to, and I had done it the same way I had done everything else Dominic's note had pointed me toward. Because he had asked me to trust the process, and I trusted him. Even now, even after everything. I had recordings of 4 calls. I had the text thread with my sister-in-law, which I had screenshotted and emailed to myself and my attorney the same day I received it. And I had something else. 3 weeks before Dominic died, he had called his mother. They had argued. He had called her after a family dinner that had gone badly. His sister had asked him for money again. His mother had backed her. His father had stayed quiet. And Dominic had driven home frustrated and called her back once our daughter was in bed. I was in the next room. I heard most of it. Dominic had said, clearly and more than once, that any money he left behind was for his wife and daughter, that his sister was an adult who needed to learn to take care of herself, and that he did not want his death to become a financial conversation. His mother had said she understood. The thing about Dominic was that he kept records too. He had a habit of sending himself emails after difficult conversations, just brief summaries, date and time, and what was said. I found these when I was going through his accounts. I found the one from that night. It was 3 sentences. It said he had told his mother clearly that his estate was for me and our daughter. It said she had acknowledged this. It said he hoped it wouldn't need to come up again. I forwarded that email to my attorney with the subject line, "Found this." He called me back within the hour. What my in-laws had not accounted for, because it likely never occurred to them that there was anything to account for, was that Dominic and I had done everything correctly. The life insurance beneficiary designation was up to date. The will was clear. There was no legal ambiguity. There was nothing for them to contest because there was nothing contestable. The only avenue they had was pressure, and pressure only works when the person being pressured doesn't know what they're doing. I knew what I was doing. My mother-in-law called one more time, about a month after the burial. She was different on this call. Warmer, softer. The version of herself she deployed when she wanted something, and had decided that honey might work where vinegar hadn't. She asked how my daughter was doing. She asked how I was sleeping. She asked if I had thought any more about the family situation. She said she just wanted everyone to heal. She said Dominic would have wanted that. I let her finish. Then I said, "I want to read you something." I read her Dominic's email. The whole thing, slowly, date and timestamp included. She was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, "He wasn't himself that night. He was upset." I said, "He sounded pretty clear to me." She said the family had been through a lot, and she hoped I would find it in my heart to be generous. I said, "I'm going to be honest with you. I've been recording our calls, and my attorney has reviewed everything. If there are any further attempts to pressure me about this, or any further implications about my fitness as a mother, I will be pursuing a harassment claim. I want you to hear that clearly." The line went so quiet I thought she had hung up. Then she said very quietly, "You've changed." I said, "Yes, I have." I didn't hear from them again for 6 weeks. When I did, it was a certified letter forwarded through their own attorney. A vague claim that Dominic had verbally promised his mother a portion of any assets he acquired during his marriage, and that this verbal promise constituted a binding agreement under Texas law. I read the letter standing at my kitchen counter, my daughter eating cereal beside me, her little feet swinging off the edge of the bar stool. I read it twice. I set it down. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Then I called my attorney and read it to him over the phone. He said, "A verbal promise with no witnesses, no documentation, and contradicted by a written record we have on file." I said, "That's what I thought." He filed the response that same afternoon. I will spare the legal language, but the substance of it was, no, the substance of it was, you have nothing. The substance of it was, if you pursue this, we will counter with everything we have, which is considerably more than you have. The claim was withdrawn within 2 weeks. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that. People might expect that part of the story to feel like a win, and it didn't. It felt like standing in a room after a storm, looking at the wreckage, trying to understand how it had all happened. Dominic was still dead. My daughter still asked for her daddy some mornings, in a way that split me straight open. Nothing that happened with his family changed any of that, but I had protected what he built. I had protected what he left, and that mattered. My daughter turned 4 in June. We had a small party. My mother, a few of her friends from daycare, a neighbor who had become a kind of unofficial aunt during the hardest months. My daughter wore a yellow dress and demanded that the birthday cake have purple frosting and approximately 47 sprinkles, a number she specified with great seriousness. I stood in our backyard watching her run through the sprinkler, and I thought about Dominic the way I did every day, not with the same drowning weight as before, but with something quieter. Something that felt almost like having a conversation with him, like he was nearby. A few months later, I opened a savings account in my daughter's name. Half of the insurance money, $450,000, went into a trust structured specifically for her education and early adulthood, managed with terms Dominic and I had actually discussed before he died, during one of those late-night conversations you have when you're new parents and newly aware of your own mortality. The other half I invested conservatively, on advice from a financial planner my attorney recommended, building something stable that my daughter and I could live from without burning through it. And then I did one more thing. Dominic had coached Little League for 4 years. He drove 40 minutes round trip on Saturday mornings to work with kids who, in some cases, had nobody else showing up for them. He bought cleats for 2 kids, 1 season, out of his own pocket, because he found out their families couldn't afford them, and he didn't make a thing of it. Nobody knew except me. I contacted the Recreation League, and I told them I wanted to establish an annual equipment fund in his name. The Dominic Fund. Nothing elaborate, just a way to make sure no kid ever had to sit out because they didn't have what they needed. It didn't take much to set up. The first year it outfitted 11 kids. I got a card from one of the families. A handwritten note from a mother I had never met, thanking me, saying her son talked about baseball like it was the thing that made sense when nothing else did. She didn't know the backstory. She just knew her kid had cleats that fit. I kept that card in the same filing cabinet where Dominic kept his folder labeled "in case." I put it right next to his handwritten note. He had written, "If something happens to me, You call Hargrove and Associates first. Don't sign anything until you do. And underneath that, in the same pen, he had written, "You're going to be okay." You know how I know? Because you always figure it out. I used to think that note was about the money, about logistics, about making sure things were handled correctly in an emergency. I don't think that anymore. I think he knew me better than I gave him credit for. I think he understood that the hardest part wouldn't be the legal documents, or the financial decisions, or even the grief, as vast and disorienting as that was. The hardest part would be the moment I realized that the people I thought I could lean on were not going to be there, and that I would have to find out what I was made of, without anyone to hold me up while I did it. He left me a note because he knew I'd need a reminder. I carry it with me now, not the paper itself but the knowledge of it. That he had thought ahead, had imagined the hard version of things, and prepared me for it, had trusted me with everything he had. My daughter has his laugh. The one that starts before the joke is finished. I heard it for the first time a few weeks ago, a real version of it, not a baby's laugh, but something that landed in my chest like something coming home. I didn't lose myself in any of this. I came close. There were months where I wasn't sure, but I didn't. I didn't stop carrying him either. I just learned to carry us both.